I remember the first month that I ever made like $100,000 plus in the business. And then you get it and you feel so empty. Triple down on your career, build a business, kill everything else in your life to achieve like this one thing.
They are high performers to the average person, but then the other aspects of their life are very broken. They don't have relationships, they don't have family, they have nobody to spend time with, they don't have connection. And to me, that's not high performance.
I was in such massive momentum that like you couldn't have stopped me if you tried. Like I would have just like ran you over like a boulder going down the hill.
You're trying to rollerblade in gravel. Not on like smooth surface that lets you keep going, you're in gravel.
Momentum at so many times in my life caused pain because
100%.
it was just run.
If you don't fix what cuts you, you're just going to bleed on the next person anyways. The whole idea of burnout with high performers, I think it often comes from the place of... I'm sure it will work. How do you feel now that we're in this new setup?
Better. My neck feels less disabled.
I feel less decrepit.
I feel less physically unwell and therefore can be present.
I'm glad to hear.
You know, it is quite difficult to be present in the moment when your body is just like raging in pain and is inflamed.
Is this like your chronic state of being?
It can be depending on like where I am. Like I don't like going home. I don't like being in cold spaces because when I'm in cold spaces, my hands instantly lock up and then I like can't focus on what I need to do because I'm like a decrepit, arthritic 30-year-old woman. God didn't favor me with the genetics that my family passed down to me. Got osteo.
She's like, God gave me everything.
We got rheumatoid.
Anything that ends in itis, she has. Bronchitis. Like, what else are you going to have?
I actually got bronchitis on the mountains of the Himalayas when I trekked Everest Base Camp.
Man,
I got altitude sickness and I got bronchitis and I thought I was going to die up in those mountains. It was a very humbling time in my life.
Jesus Christ. And that anybody listening is going to be like, oh, I have the itis.
Anyone listening will be like, man, this lady's traveled some cool places, and they wouldn't be wrong. I was an adventurer before I got started in business. I actually built a business so I could travel and make money at the same time. So
How'd that play out?
pretty well. I've been to quite a few places.
Good.
I mean, true days off in the last couple of years. Maybe 10. Maybe. Still work when I go on trips.
Yeah, of
but
course. You didn't go on a 4-week, a 12-month, or 12-week Euro trip and not talk to anybody in that 2 years?
Not yet. But I like... well, that's what we're working towards. No, but I did the 6-month go find
Before
yourself backpacking thing. Went through a breakup, wanted to find myself, wanted to find friends and community. Dude, I remember being in a hostel after being gone for 4 months, living out of a 30-liter backpack.
Yeah.
Just bum traveler, staying in hostels for $6 a night, washing my clothes in the sink with a bar of soap. I was as ghetto as they came, trying to stretch my money to travel through all these countries. And I remember being in this hostel in Thailand and someone's like, so what are you going to do when you go home? And I was like, I'm going to make my first $1 million before 30. I was the only person in the hostel talking about this, and everyone else was like, yeah, I think I'm just going to go to Cambodia. And I was not in the right room at all. And I was like,
nope.
Okay, well, back home, nobody wanted to travel. So I was like, well, maybe I'll go find more adventurous, go-getter people like me. So then I started traveling, met all these different people in hostels. And they were just like, yeah, I don't know what I want to do with my life. And I was like, I'm going to make my first $1 million before 30. I'm going to build this big business. Mm-hmm. And I was just so intense in this hostel with my little backpack. And I was like, someone doesn't belong and it's you.
I'm new here.
Yeah. So I thought it was funny. That's my little backstory to my backpacking trip of 6 months. I remember, which kind of feeds into what we're going to talk about today. I remember trekking Everest Base Camp, being in a bus going from Kathmandu to Pokhara, which is this really cool lake town, I suppose, there.
Where is this?
This was in Nepal when I trekked Everest Base Camp. And I remember looking out this bus window, seeing, and I'd like just done this like huge hike. I was sick, but it was so cool. And I had like just this amazing experience sitting there looking out the bus window thinking, I am too ambitious to travel full time and not have something that I am like working towards. Because like at that point I'd been not working for like 2 months and I had all these cool adventures. I'd went to Africa. I'd been like multiple countries in Africa, jumped to Nepal, did this huge base camp trek. And I was just like banging out bucket list items for myself. And I was like, I am too ambitious to just live out of a backpack for the rest of my life. I continued to travel for quite a few months after that. But in that moment, I made a decision I was going to go home and build a business. So, anyways.
You killed me when you said, "Oh, I went to find myself." That is my favorite line people use. That is my favorite line. You're right in front of me. I found you. You're right here.
I like to say it as like a joke that is like eat, pray, love. I just wanted to go travel. I was like dying to get out of my hometown.
Do it. No. I'm all for it. But the justification I hear from people is, "No, I'm finding myself."
I was like, I want African safari trip. Like I want to see animals in the
Do
wild. You're going to send me to Uganda one day so I can see the gorillas.
Yeah, we're going to need like a lot of private security and you are not traveling commercially. That's how that's going to work.
For everybody listening to this, I like to tell Far what my travel plans are. And then you look up the government advisory based on this
is how it works. When it gets extreme, I like itemize your certain requests and I go, we need this much money and a plane and security. We're not sending you in commercially to Uganda. That's not a thing. Sorry.
That's fine. I'll still get to see the bareback gorillas one day. Silverback gorillas.
I guessed.
Just out there with my little binoculars in the bush.
You're not free-willing it to Uganda the way you did Nepal. That's all I'm telling you. You can gain that and just go do what you want to do, but that's not how it's going to work. There's some places in the world, like if you want to go to North Korea one day, it's not going to be like that either. Mm-hmm. I don't know if North Korea is on the list, but...
No, this is reasonable. I have more responsibilities at this point in my life than I did at 23 when I pissed off backpacking for 6 months by myself. You want to know what's funny? I'll say this and then we can talk about high performers. I had 2 and at times 3 jobs for like a 9-month period of time because I wanted to save up as much money as I could to go traveling. Yeah. And I think I ended up putting away close to like $40,000. And I just worked all the time and lived 90% of my income went to savings to go travel. Yeah. And I lived bare bones. And I remember I was getting close to like the end of my time and I was talking to different friends and they're like, "Oh, are you going to request a leave of absence from work?" And I was like, "No, I'm just going to quit." And they're like, "You're not even going to attempt to ask your employer for time off?" And I was like, "No," because I didn't want to be told no. So when I went on my backpacking trip, I left all of my jobs. And they were just like, "You could have requested a leave of absence." And I was like, "Oof," but then you could have denied me and you would have thought that I was going to listen. So instead, I just put in my notice, left. And then when I came back, 2 of the jobs hired me back.
Who needs a leave of absence when you're good?
I'm just going to quit temporarily, go backpack. I don't know when I'm going to be home, so there's no point of giving me a leave of absence because then I would have had a timeline and I would have had to come back by a certain point. I would have had to agree to this and I
want no rules, she said.
I didn't want to be forced into a box that I didn't want to go into. That in a nutshell is like snapshot into how I operate.
If you anything about that entire sentence just covered it. I don't want to be
put in a box.
My
whole life has been like that, kicking and screaming. Feet on the outside of the box, like,
no idea.
You won't make me. Someone's listening to this and they absolutely resonate with that. And they're like,
totally understand.
Me also. Which, speaking of working 3 jobs, saving up a ton of money to go backpacking, we're talking today about high performers. Mm-hmm. And you made a very interesting comment, which I would kind of like to start with that. So first things first, made a post on social media, said that most high performers will probably go through extreme burnout at least once in their life. And a lot of people resonated with it and they're like, either this was me or I needed to hear this or
Sure.
insert whatever. There was emotional resonance with it there. And you and me got to talking, and you had an interesting take on high performers. So I think we should just start.
Which part
there.
of the take was interesting? I'd love to know, like, what part of it?
The part where probably, I guess, your definition of what a high performer
Is not necessarily aligned with what you see on the internet or the world around us.
or like the majority of people's
Yeah.
perspective when it comes to it.
100%.
So I'm curious, from your perspective,
Mm-hmm.
what do you define as somebody who is like a true high performer, and then compare that to maybe kind of what society coins it as.
So if I look at a high performer myself, I think the idea is, so society would tell you it's the person who overachieves, quote unquote. It's the person who, goes nonstop or whatever. And oftentimes the definition in which a high performer is in like the masses, if you look a little closer, you find out that most of those people are operating that way because they're running from something, not running towards. And it's a very small delineation. Running from something is, I come from a certain background, I come from certain belief systems, and I'm trying to get as far away from whatever I think or whatever pain I think is coming with that said belief. When you're running towards something and you're present with it, there's an understanding of like an integration. And it's not to say that as a high performer, there isn't times that you're going to behave similar to the previous version of a person I was talking about, but you also have an understanding of what you value, and the thing you are running toward is driven by passion, purpose, love, commitment towards the thing, not I have to do this thing because I don't want anything to do this. I'll give you an example, and we've talked about this before. I've had the joy of being able to work with professional athletes. I've been in certain settings, and one of the things I've learned is a lot of guys, and I'll use the NBA and the NFL as an example. There are a lot of people who are really good at what they do. They work their ass off at what they do. They make a lot of money, but they don't love the game. And it's not in for the purpose of I want to be better or create something or leave a legacy or whatever have you. It's I came from the hood. I didn't grow up with much. I can't go back. I got to get my parents out. I got to do this. It's almost in this like complex of I just want to avoid that pain at all costs. So I'm running away from that pain, and whatever I have to do to make sure I don't experience that pain again, I will. Now, on the other side of that, you find people who do have a lot of money. And this isn't just pro athletes. There's a lot of people. I've seen this like this over my life. They are high performers to the average person, but then the other aspects of their life are very broken. They don't have relationships. They don't have family. They have nobody to spend time with. They don't have intimate connection. And to me, that's not high performance. That's running from something that you fear or something that you grew up with in pain and thought the answer was to over-index in the opposite. And it's not to say that to create something great, it doesn't require some sort of extreme. But a lot of times for people, when they get to that outcome, the belief from people around them is, oh, you're a high performance, but it's like you didn't see all these other things that they gave up or didn't have along the way. And the only reason they gave up all these things is because they thought if I had the money, all these things other things get addressed, but they don't. And so high performance to me is your ability to focus and zone in on a goal or an outcome or whatever it is that you want. And you are also capable of doing that across your life, not just in one aspect. Because to me, true high performance is being able to do it in more than one bucket, not just, hey, I'm a great entrepreneur. So that's like that overarching theme to me from a high performer. I think what society identifies as a high performer is they look at someone like, oh, he makes a ton of money. Oh, he's just constantly working. He's an overachiever. He's a high performer, or she, for that matter. And you find very quickly that they are running from something. They're not running towards something. And I think that delineation is what, in my eyes, separates true high performance.
Yeah. I've had different times in my life where I was running from something. I've also had times in my life where I was just like running towards something because I wanted it. Mm-hmm. And not from a place of like, oh, I'm trying to avoid pain or got to get out of the hood, bro.
Got to get out of this environment, fam.
Yeah. I've been on both sides of it before. We were talking about as well, a lot of people run from themselves, and they are running from something. You have a deep inadequacy, a deep insecurity.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not good enough. I'm not smart enough. Maybe you grew up in an environment in your home life where you saw your parents struggle with money. You saw maybe poor relationships, abuse. It was dysfunctional. Then you grow up and you're like, I don't ever want to experience that type of pain again. I don't ever want to not have food on the table, bills paid, getting evicted from a place to live. So you just over-index into the opposite extreme. Like you said, triple down on your career, build a business, kill everything else in your life to achieve like this one thing. And then you get it and you feel so empty. And there's just such a deep void when you achieve this thing that you thought was going to make you feel different. And it's so interesting. We get wrapped up in it. I have experienced that at like various points in my life. I remember I was kicked out of school, my high school in grade 10. I was told that I would never graduate. I had probably an issue with the vice principal that ended up kicking me out of school. And I was just so pissed. And in that moment was like, I'm going to grow up to be an adult that makes in a month what you make in a year. And that was like I can remember the moment, like walking through the school. It was so visceral to me, just wanting to prove somebody wrong and do it from a place of vengeance. I remember the first month that I ever made like $100,000 plus in the business. That was my first thought, was I made more in a month than you made in an entire year. But the work that had to go into achieving that goal, like, far exceeded the I fucking got you moment, you know?
100%.
Like, and I remember getting there and it was just like, I don't feel like this doesn't change that conversation that happened in grade 10. This person probably doesn't even remember that he kicked me out of high school. He's seen so many students and dealt with so much over the years that like 0% chance he's out for coffee on a Sunday and thinks, oh, I wonder if that chick I kicked out of high school amounted to anything, right? Yeah. And it's so interesting that we go through stuff in our life where someone hurts us, they reject us, they don't believe in us, and we attach so much meaning towards it, and then we spend the rest of our lives running from it. And then, as you said, it's like it presents as being a high achiever. Anybody,
people's perception of that.
Yeah. Like, that is what society would look at. Oh, you worked so hard, you did all of this. And it's like, but it's not coming from a place of joy and love and passion. And I want to build this because there's contribution there. It's like, I'm doing this to prove somebody wrong. Or for somebody to not be right about me, I guess. Yeah. So with all of that being said, we'd also touched on a lot of people maybe don't want to rectify that, the thing that they're running from. What if I fix this? What if I find peace with this and kind of like heal through some of this stuff, and then it fundamentally changes me for the rest of my life? And maybe I'm scared I lose my drive. So talk a little bit about that.
So the conversation becomes, if I take away the thing that drove you, how do your behaviors change? And for a lot of people, it breaks the identity of what they believe they had to be or become, right? And I think you have your own experience of like swinging both sides of it around even the business to some degree, where it was like, I don't even want to do this. Let's just pack it up. And then it was like, okay, no, I'm passionate about this. I want to do this. And I'm no longer coming from a place of fear. Like, you've danced both lines. And I think for a lot of people, when you tell them, okay, just let this go. Like, once you let this go, what happens? They can't even conceptualize like what their life's going to look like, because their entire identity was built around, I have to get away from this thing to become whatever I believe I need to, or whatever that means, like the stories that were impressed upon them. And so when I talk to someone, they're like, I have these dreams and visions. I'm like, why? Like, what is the thing that drives you? And it's not to say that we don't all have stories. Like, I'm aware that a big part of what drives me is, hey, like, my parents did the best they could with what they had, right? There's two ways to look at what happened. I can look at it and say, we just didn't have enough, and I just want to run from it. And like, I want to make so much money that I could never conceptualize trying to raise kids or doing what they did and never have that happen. Or I can look at it and say, I'm so grateful for it. And what drives me is to be able to continue that passing of the, not even the passing of the torch, but continuing to contribute forward to give greater, because they gave greater to me than they had for themselves. And I think that's the gift of life. But I even know as a individual, I've come from two different headspaces. I've come from the place of like, probably up until I was like 16, 17, it's like, I got to figure out how to do the sports thing and the academic thing. Because like my parents didn't make a lot of money. Like they did, we were middle class, but like they never made the type of money in my head. I was like, that's what I want to do. Right. So my perspective was, oh, they just didn't have it or whatever. And when I kind of shifted out of that, it didn't for me personally change what I wanted. It changed my approach, which in my experience lets you endure more.
Yeah.
I think that's the one thing that people don't realize is the whole idea of burnout with high performers. I think it often comes from the place of you're running from something and you are tired. You are not driven or fueled by something far greater than you. My purpose, my mission as a man now is far greater than running from what I believe my parents did or didn't have. It's what I believe I am responsible to for my wife, my future kids, family, the people I care about, the life I want to build. That's what I feel pulled towards. So when I get tired, I'm reminded like, this is the person I want to be at 50. This is the person I want to be at 60. And I owe it to that person that I say I am and want to become. Not I have to run and like, oh, if I fuck up, I fail and all this stuff. It's like, that doesn't register with me. There was also a time in my life where it was like, oh, if I don't become a Division I basketball player and make all this money and all this, like I'll have failed compared to my friends. That's not my measuring stick. I'm not looking to measure based on my perception of failure.
Curious.
I think that's the other side of it.
I have maybe an opinion. I'm curious what yours is.
Mm-hmm.
My opinion is that you can go through like I want to accomplish this thing and I have this goal. Maybe it's like
Sure.
I'm going to build this business or I'm going after this thing. And you can be driven from like two parts and swap between them based on like where your focus is on it. I've had times in my life where I have moved mountains in a short period of time and never once felt tired or
Sure.
exhausted by what I was doing. And I felt like pulled and excited and joyful and like, I'm just going to do this. And I was so passionate and excited about it. I've also had times, maybe in the pursuit of the same goal, where my focus shifted in what was driving me. And I started focusing on maybe this person can't be right about me or like I can't miss.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess the thought is like, can you be driven by two things or like maybe swap between them in the pursuit of what it is you're going after?
I think when you have I don't even want to say it as like not, when you are still early in your maturity as a person, you can perceive it as you've done both. Because here's the thing. If you're always driven by the purpose and the mission of where you're headed as a person, that always is coming through a lens of something bigger. It's not, I'm trying to run for this person. So like for you, if that's what you experience, it's not to say that you couldn't have switched through both. It's just that running from, or I got to prove this person wrong, probably had more of an influence on how you were operating than the bigger thing. That's what I'm suggesting. I think when you get to a space where it's like, this is my response, this is what I want, this is who I am, this is my responsibility, this is how I see myself, and this is who I need to show up for friends, family, whatever. Personal experience and also talking to quite a lot of older people around this conversation, you don't ever, your like mind doesn't, or perspective never even goes to, oh, I gotta prove this person wrong. Because it's not about trying to prove anybody wrong or try to like make a point or run from something. It's like, this bigger thing is the thing that matters to me and I'm committed to that thing. I think that's where it becomes different. And I think there is a period in most people's lives, I think everybody's gone through it at some point, you have a perception of money, status, where you stand with people, and you will be influenced more by the running from than running towards. It doesn't mean you don't have a sense of what running towards means, but you also are not truly driven by it intrinsically. Because I think that's the difference between being externally driven or internally. Because if it's about something that's deeper within you, that's for something greater, it's a lot different than being like, Sally told me in the 9th grade, you're not going to amount to anything. Like I can think of there are very specific conversations where I remember hearing people say, oh, he's not going to become anything. Friends in college being like, fuck you for thinking that like you can do something bigger. But that never drives me. Like when I'm going through a difficult time in my life, I never think, oh, I should do this. But it's not like I'm not aware that those things happen. They just don't drive me. It's kind of like, that's your perception. If my parents don't agree with what I do, same thing. It's like, yeah, that's your perception.
Yeah.
But no part of it me is driven by, and I think that's the truth with most people. If that's not even given, if that isn't even a thought to you, you're just, this is where I'm going, this is what I value, this is how I'm going to get there. It's a very different feeling, and it's a very different perspective. So I think early when you are working through who you are as a person, and I think with most of us, we've all had insecurities, self-worth issues, whatever, you will find that you might oscillate between the two based on your emotional state. But I think as you evolve, I think what happens is the insecurities, the things that you become more accepting of them. And so the things that maybe influence you to some degree just kind of fall. And I'm looking at it in hindsight, and I can say probably where that really registered for me, and I was fortunate to have certain people in my life, was probably around like 22, 23. But I can tell you, like, so much of 18 to 22 was very, very, very driven by what does this person think I can or can't do. Even though that there was that part of me that's like, and I look at my own evolution, it's like, it's not that the things that I've wanted necessarily changed. My approach to it has.
Yeah.
It's not that things don't still get difficult in my life. My perspective on it is very different now. There is no, to me, it's like everything is a blessing that's meant to happen as it happened for me to learn. Like things are falling apart to actually come together. That's my perspective. But at 21, in the moment my mom got ill and I'm frustrated with my father, in that moment I'm like, this is all fucking bullshit and it's all happening to me and I don't fucking know how to do this at 21.
Yeah.
So I think that it's like an evolution for most people.
I think in this conversation, I think back to like my grade 12 year. Like I never once felt tired in any of that.
Yeah.
Like I didn't view it as, I didn't get tired. I didn't burn out. I just felt pulled the entire year. Like I was in such massive momentum that like you couldn't have stopped me if you tried. Like I would have just like ran you over like a boulder going down the hill. That's like where, and I guess what I bring up is like I noticed different things throughout that year that I would then maybe have a moment of doubt. Like, what if I can't do this? And I just quite quickly removed it because I was like, that doesn't.
I think the other thing for you to realize is there's levels of what that capacity looks like for different people. So I'm very familiar with your emotional background and how you were raised. You probably by nature have a higher tolerance for certain things with yourself emotionally than some people do. That's just my honest truth. There are not many people who have gone through the things you have that have a high tolerance for emotional pain and will run through it. I don't think everybody has that. I think there are varying degrees of the person you are that in a different world with a different upbringing, with a different childhood experience, they may not have that capacity. And I think that threshold is going to be varied based on what your home dynamics were. The person who went through tremendous amounts of pain. I mean, there's that.
So how does that play into like grade 12?
So I'll give you how I see it, knowing like your background, from the conversations we've had. If I look at the best entrepreneurs, a lot of them grew up in turmoil. Their threshold for pain is extremely high, just by nature. So the reason a lot of those high performers don't realize it till way later, like those empty things don't come to play for them, is because they went through so much that their perspective is nothing can be worse than being neglected at home. Nothing can be worse than being in a house with no food or in a poor state. Like your emotional ceiling for pain is so much higher in that situation versus, I'll give you the other side. If you're a trust fund kid, right? You're given you can't even, oh my God, I didn't make 100 million this year. Daddy didn't give me the money. Like they're soft. Most of these kids are, no, literally. So like that's
laughing because it's true.
No, but, and then it's like if I look, so using that, you had a higher tolerance. So in your broader perspective, that 12th grade thing is very small to you.
Mm.
But then if I look at it broadly, the way you operated in that window is then also how you operated in building your business. But eventually that caught up to you, right? So it's not that it didn't matter. It's just the gravity of it to you in context was not sufficient enough for you to be like, fuck this. I don't think you lost your voice during your 12th grade year, did you? You didn't go through any physical ailments. You didn't have 100K in payroll that you couldn't pay. None of those things were true. But that same operating modem was true when you launched your business. The difference was at some point it physically caught up to you.
Yeah.
And I think that's where the nuance is like, teenagers, cool. It'll eventually catch up to you at some point. Whether it's illness, whether it's divorce or relationships ending, whether somebody close to you passes away, it doesn't really matter. It will catch up to those people at some point. Mm. So, like, for you, emotional capacity, very different. A kid who grows up in a very rich household that's soft, in your situation, probably will fuck it, let me do cocaine instead of trying to catch up. No, literally, think about it. In 1 year, you went from, I'm not anywhere near graduating to valedictorian. You didn't grow up in an extremely affluent household either. Mm-hmm. Right? The kid who grows up and it's daddy's money might just be like, I mean, fuck it, we got money, so it's okay. So it's also understanding like the relativity of what I'm saying. Like contextually, it worked differently for you than it would another person. For me, contextually, it worked different than it does for even my brother to some degree.
Part of why I bring this up is because like there's going to be various people listening to this, mm-hmm. and there might be somebody who falls into a similar camp that I did, where it's like you have a high work capacity, sure. and you have a high emotional tolerance for stuff, and you don't see this as maybe an issue or a pattern in your life because it just doesn't hurt. Or it doesn't...
I don't think it just doesn't hurt, though.
Like I remember at people at different points in my life being like, well, you should slow down because you're going to burn out. And then my immediate reaction was like, fuck off. There you go. and then
it might not have happened immediately, but eventually it did.
Yeah. So like somebody listening to this where it's like, you want this thing. Mm-hmm. Like you have this goal. And maybe it's like, I'm going to climb my career. Sure. I want to get this role in the next like 2 years, and I want to make this kind of money, and I want like these accolades, right? I'm just using it as an example. Sure. I'm willing to burn the candle at both ends, sure. do whatever the fuck is required of me, lock in, and you don't really take as good of care. But here's the thing. I think sometimes when you're in that and you really want that thing, there are certain things you will put in place that you perceive to be taking care of yourself.
Correct.
So this is the path you're on.
Yeah.
How does that person discern that it's like what's driving you is actually going to hurt you eventually? Because like you're just so in momentum that everything you touch turns to gold and you don't realize the cost.
Correct. But your perception is that your identity is what. So when you say it turns into gold, what does that mean?
Well, I think it's different for everybody.
There you go.
But that's what I mean. It's like, as somebody who has been in that state before, mm-hmm. who might be listening to this, if somebody would have told me, hey, you should slow down. Maybe you don't have to push yourself so hard. It's okay. Like, you can slow down, take time off. I would have absolutely perceived that as like, you are weak and mediocre and get the fuck out of my way.
Cool, but your perspective is coming from how you're upbringing. You default into that's weak and mediocre. But that's also your perception of what you experienced when you were raised, and certain people were that way in your perception. So, like, that's the other side of this. I think the best answer to give is from the average person, the majority of the people listening, you need somebody who can check you. And you actually have to be willing to take that feedback.
To be checked.
Yeah, and like it's just being honest. Like you have to be willing to do it. Like, do you? I always ask my friends. I'm like, do you have people who check you? Do you have someone who like unequivocally, if they just say, "Yo, you're being fucking dumb," you'll listen. And if you don't have one person, you need to go find somebody that you can trust. And that can be trial and error for a lot of people. Don't get me wrong, but you have to be willing to have that and ask for it and seek it, right? I think the reason a lot of people, truthfully, most people are listening are going to learn through a painful lesson. The first time they learn anything very difficult, it will be because like the truth of the situation. It's going to be through something very difficult. It's not because it has to be. It's just because of constraints, environment, etc. And then there was never the let me pause. Let me like truly think this through. Is this what I'm being told, or is this what I believe? Because at the end of the day, who you become is a mixture of what you've been taught and what you've been told, and then somewhere along the way figuring out who you are. So most people are going to learn through pain. I personally think the earlier you learn the painful lessons, like I always say, I'm very grateful I learned and watched certain people in my life, because there's a lot of things that even though I may have made certain mistakes along the way, I was much quicker to find, hey, don't do this. Hey, don't stay in this relationship. Hey, don't work this job. Hey, don't pursue this. Because I watched other people around me do certain things, and I became keen to, they didn't like it. Okay, this reminds me of this. It's also being able to be willing and perceptive to be curious of the world around you. You will quickly find that a lot of these answers on how to approach your life are actively always in front of you. You just have to be willing to be curious to ask the questions to uncover the answers you're looking for. And that often reflects of something that's already within you anyways.
I think one of the most detrimental beliefs somebody can have without working through some of their inner stuff is, I have a high tolerance for chaos.
Pain, yeah.
Where people are just like, oh, they almost like wear their ability to manage chaos and stress as like a badge of honor.
100%.
Which is just so fucking detrimental.
No, it's incredible. But I do this with clients. They're like, oh yeah, like I'm just, I tore my ACL, but I'm going to go squat 500 pounds anyways. I'm like, let's just think about this. If you scrape your knee, when you were a kid, I like using a child analogy for this. When you scraped your knee, what happened? You cried. How long did your crying last? 2 years or 10 minutes? Probably like 10 minutes. Why? You cried, you were in pain, you felt through it. Someone got you a Band-Aid, put some cream on it. You probably gave yourself a few days not to beat through it, and then you just got up and kept going. That's how kids are very resilient in that sense. We are the opposite. We scrape our knee, and then we just like drag it on the fucking cement. There is no badge for being a hardo. And if you're in, like, I think fitness is the place where you see it the most, where it's like, oh, I'm a bodybuilder, oh, I'm jacked. It's like you're training through injury constantly. And you're wondering why you get to 35 with a broken back, no kneecaps, looking like Quasimodo. Like, what did you expect to happen in this process, right? And so there is no reward for it. And it's not saying that there isn't going to be some sort of pain or some sort of challenge, whether it's emotionally. Loss for a lot of people is never easy. Physical pain is going to happen. You might still get injured. It's just, what is your approach to pain? Is it to ram yourself through pain because that's just the fucking chip on your shoulder way of living? Or is it like, let's resolve to minimize the risk of this happening again so we can take 10 steps forward rather than 1 step forward? And that is, for a lot of people, that is not the way they want to operate. Like, it's just not. I'm looking at even our relationship, and I'm looking at it from a business standpoint. When we started, you definitely thought I was fucking lazy. And it's like, no, I move exceedingly fast. I'm just not interested in doing something that fundamentally I can see before I do it. I'm going to trip and bash my face into the wall and then just keep riding that train of bashing my face into the wall. I'm aware we're going to bash ourselves at some point.
I laugh because I've been on, like, now both sides of it. The run 100 miles an hour, scrape the knee, drag down the road and give her shit. And then also having to learn, okay, this hurts. How can we avoid it in the future and permanently solve this? Or I can see the wipeout coming.
There you go. We've gone through quite a journey. When we first started working together, even when I was like, we were just friends, I was like, you just want to keep going. And like the word momentum comes up a lot with you, and I think your perspective on this has definitely evolved. you would use that word in those days. Hey, I'm just gonna keep going. I'm in momentum, and I'm like, did you like at all think that you're on momentum, not on like a slide that lets you continue, but on like gravel? You're trying to rollerblade in gravel, not on like smooth surface that lets you keep going. You're in gravel, and that's going to be part of the journey. But you would use the word momentum, and then when you were in pain, that word was nowhere to be found. Nowhere to be found. I'm like, man, for someone who told me it's all about momentum, now you're literally crying shepherd's pie on the floor.
But like momentum at so many times in my life caused pain because
100%.
it was just run.
So it creates the other problem, right? Where it's like your perception is momentum, momentum, momentum. But then when you have the experience of momentum means pain, then what do? You falter.
I also had times in my life where momentum didn't mean pain, and it actually created some very wonderful outcomes
100%.
for myself. So I've been on, okay, I got into momentum and then just never let my foot off the gas pedal
And
was like, this was amazing. And I was so happy. And then when I got to the finish line of whatever it was that I was trying to do, I wasn't tired. Like I just like reached the finish line, and it was like, okay, this is good. I've also had times where I got into momentum and just left a path of destruction in my wake and was not able to slow down.
I think being able to, and not even I find being able to get in momentum, get to some landmark that you identify or something you notice, whether it's a form of creating a pause or it's a marker for yourself of like what that looks like, being able to get there and be like, okay, we're here. Things are good. This is what I've done. Reflect a little bit and then just continue. That pause, that moment of being able to be silent and appreciate everything you've learned in that journey to then continue. There's like the healthy dance of like pause and go. And then keep going and then slight pause and then go. I don't think...
Can't relate. No, I'm just kidding.
No, you definitely can now in hindsight, but it took quite a bit of being tired to see it, but it's...
I say that to just talk shit. For those listening that are like, can't relate. they're
It usually takes practicing it before you realize it. Right? I think that's the thing for a lot of people is they don't practice. They don't learn anew.
Yeah. So we'll bring it back. We've discussed kind of your perspective of a high performer.
Yeah.
Talked about running from oneself,
Mm-hmm.
deep inadequacy.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say the life event has happened to somebody. You've just been whacked in the face with a 2x4, and you were like, holy shit, this hurts, and I don't want to keep living like this anymore. Or there's like niggles and whispers that you're starting to question if the way you are operating maybe needs an upgrade.
I think most people are not going to understand the niggles and whispers.
See, I actually disagree.
I'm looking at you as the perfect example of I don't think people learn from niggles and whispers. The only way they learn from niggles and whispers is once they've already had one fucking semi-truck hit them.
Yes, but I think that people have awareness to the niggles and whispers,
No.
and then they choose to fucking disregard
100%,
them.
because the story, this is part of it.
So sure, you need to get like ran over by a semi before you wake up.
Most people, yeah.
Cool, no issue. But there is, because once you get hit by the semi, you're like, oh, there.
By the way, anybody watching, I don't think you have to.
I don't think so either.
I think it will take that for most people, but I don't think you have to. And I think the other side of this too is like, while I don't fully subscribe to the be a well-rounded person, because I don't think that's fully possible. Like, I've never met someone who's shredded to the bone, wealthy as fuck, has unlimited time with their family, has every single piece. Like, that would be the extreme of well-rounded, right? I think it's identifying what your values are and what you want and being okay with starting with less to have all of the things you could ever ask for. That's the bigger thing.
So let's say the event happened.
Uh-huh.
I got ran over by the semi. I'm laying in the hospital bed right now, emotionally, and just in life. What is the clear next step someone can take? Because when that happens, it is like a god-awful, terrifying.
Yeah. How did I get here? You're never going to understand or be able to reverse engineer change in behavior without understanding how you get here. I'll give you the perfect example. It's like the person who wakes up and looks in the mirror and goes, holy fuck, I'm fat. How'd you get here? I had shitty eating habits. I didn't exercise. I don't sleep well. I'm not active. I stress eat. Awesome. You've identified those things. It's very easy to go get clear and be like, hey, this is what I need to change. And or who do I need to seek for help? If you are not clear on how you got there, you will have no idea what you need to change. And so if someone's listening and they're like either rock bottom, how did you get here? What are the things that you did? What are also the better question is, what are the things you believed that fundamentally turned out on not to be true? Because I'll give you with using health as the easy one, a lot of people are like, oh, I'm young, so my metabolism and all this stuff is good. And they wake up at 30 and they're like, God, I'm a fat lord of shit. Seriously. Yep. And it's like, okay, you believe that. And there are very few obviously there is an exception to everything. But I'm a big believer in start with the averages before you start trying to bend the rules for yourself. Because here's the reality.
Oh, but that just makes somebody roar inside.
100%. But here's the thing. If you understand the averages and then you learn what is going to work for you, then you can bend the rules. Learn the rules of life or the game or however you want to look at it, and then figure out how to bend it based on who you are. Right? That is fundamentally your gift. And everybody's gifts are different. Right? For me, I can look at it with fitness and stuff. My approach to things is I learned all the rules of training, I've learned all the rules of nutrition, sleep, recovery, etc. And I'm like, cool, I can bend this to make it work for me, but I also understand why it works for me based on who I am, the way I operate in my genetics. I didn't learn that the first day I started lifting weights. You learn that with practice and time. Learn the foundational principles. The same thing in business. Like, Apple is no different than Microsoft, is no different than the next business. They clearly found a way to bend the rules of business to create what they wanted to create. So you have to figure out what got you to where you are, and then what are the rules or laws of land or life, however you want to see it. And then you can bend it based on what you determine over time to be your gift or your gifts, period. Like, that's the thing. You have a high emotional tolerance for pain. On the other end, I can poke you and you'll start crying and you'll be like, you hurt me. Physically. Like, that's the other extreme. No, seriously. Like, quite literally, not even 24 hours ago, I was like, is this the problem? Like, oh, you hurt me. I'm sorry, here, let me just hug you and it's okay. Don't worry about it. Yeah. Right? So it's like, okay, you're aware you have a high emotional tolerance for certain things from a pain standpoint. Great. You're aware of that. That's your gift. So maybe in certain ways you can work a little harder. You can last in certain ways more than the next person. Whatever. That's a gift. You're also going to then be aware that I have something that people around me don't have, so I will be the one willing to take more risk, willing to live on less, whatever, for a longer period of time than the person next to me. Yeah. My tolerance is higher. That doesn't mean everybody around me is like that, and because I'm aware of that, I can learn how to dance, be myself, and create an environment that supports what's around me. But you have to learn that.
Yeah. That comment makes me laugh because when I was younger, I used to say, I am willing to work harder and longer for less immediate reward than most people. 100%. And, like, that's still true to this day. Yeah. I just have a different understanding of myself and where that came from when I was younger. It's like, if I didn't have that, I would have quit so long ago.
100%.
Also, in some ways, if I didn't have that, would I have made better decisions earlier? Because that wasn't, I think it's like both sides of it, right? I think there's always, as you'd say, like duality between the two. It's like in so many ways that's a gift. And then at other points in my life, that was probably quite dysfunctional and not helpful based on where I was at with things.
I think the other side of it that people miss is the things that we often define as dysfunction or compensation. One of the things I love in sports is they talk about, oh, well, if I look at the like Usain Bolt or some of the best athletes ever, they have some by human mechanics, like biomechanics, they have some compensations that the average person looking at that be like, that's not good for your feet, it's not good for your joints, etc. That is their superpower that makes them an elite athlete. So they know when to tap in and leverage what they are in their compensation while finding their harmony in the middle too. And I think when you start to look at people like that, it's the same thing for us as individuals. It's like, what are your gifts? What are your compensations? Can you learn how to make it a tool that you can leverage for use rather than something that you constantly stay into and can eventually put you down the wrong rabbit hole, right? Being a hard worker is fantastic. If you also don't know how to recover or take time to disconnect, it will catch up to you. That's true whether it's physical sport or it's business or it's your own personal life. You've learned this yourself. Like you've probably learned more in the last, I'd say, 18 months on how to, hey, I need to work and also I need to make time for my friends and the people I love and disconnecting and what is my joy, creatively, whatever. You found a better harmony to that.
I got a question that I think might be useful for someone listening to this. So we've gone down the high performer route. You've hit rock bottom. What has led you to this point? And more importantly, what did you believe that led you here? Cool. Most times when you end up at that point, you're very disconnected from yourself and you don't really understand your nature. You've just been on autopilot for so long. What can somebody do to, like, I guess, develop the self-awareness of, like, what is your nature? So I have what I believe that has led me here, and I have, this is kind of like the decisions I made and the patterns that led me to this moment. But, like, how can somebody begin to understand what their nature is? Because, like, your nature is different than mine, which is different than Brad's, which is different than Ryan's.
Sure.
Right? So how can somebody start to discover that for themselves? Like, just what their nature is.
I think the first thing is obviously identifying how did I get here? What are those events? So I've hit rock bottom. What has happened to this point that I can identify, right? Because we can all identify how we got to rock bottom. You can probably, if I asked you, even in the moments when you hit rock bottom, you probably very quickly identified, I'm working too much, I don't have a voice, I like all these things that had happened that led up to it. It all comes to a halt in one moment, and then when you take a step back, it's like, I have been working too hard, I have been doing this, I have been doing that. It's very easy to identify. Then the next thing is, after you are clear on, okay, how did I get here? Why did I choose these behaviors? So if you keep working super hard, great, there's nothing wrong with working hard, but why did you keep choosing to do this when it led here? What didn't you see? What weren't you aware of? Because I think part of what happens is when we hit rock bottom or when we hit a stalling point in our life, it's the same thing in training. We just keep doing things without questioning why we're doing it or looking at it. We don't take the time to pause. So when you hit the bottom point, now you have no choice but to pause. So then ask, why did I, if I use fitness as the easiest example of this, I haven't gotten stronger. Why? I've been doing the same thing over and over again. Cool. I've been more fatigued. I thought doing more was going to help me break a plateau, but it didn't work. Okay, why is that? I didn't have enough adequate rest. I didn't have whatever. But it's not going to be hard for you to figure out why you got to where you got to. Once you're like, hey, how did I get here? Then look at all the behaviors that led you there. Why did I do those things? Okay. The reason I worked so hard is because I believed that by working as hard as I can and just not quitting and not stopping, I was going to get to where I had. Clearly that thesis didn't work for me. Why did I believe that? Why did I believe this thesis before I started? It's what I learned from my parents. Okay. Now you're getting into some introspection. Why did I just blindly believe everything that my parents said? And you're going to, we're human, like your parents are there to raise you, but at some point you have to make the choice to be responsible for yourself. Otherwise you just become a function of your programming.
Do you think people pick up patterns and beliefs that go against their true nature based on what they've just been fed and told throughout their life?
I don't want to say you get fed things. I think we don't necessarily understand the context of what we're being told. I think this brings up a conversation around parenting that I find most people are not necessarily prepared for, and this is a whole different conversation to have to begin with. But I don't think you can parent any two kids the same way. You can have certain principles, you can have certain values, but a girl versus a boy needs to be parented very differently to learn the lessons they need to as individuals, to become whoever they're meant to be. And a lot of times what happens in parenting dynamics is anything that we haven't resolved, we just pass down to our kids, right? Like, if you don't fix what cuts you, you're just going to bleed on the next person anyways. That's how it's going to work. So I think when you get into that conversation, it's like, it's carryover from previous generations. It's carryover from your parenting. And it just gets passed down. It gets passed down and passed down. So this conversation becomes far deeper than just, hey, I got this programming. It's like, this is this can be a generational thing, one. And then two, somewhere along the line, someone or something has to happen for that to change. And you can make that the choice to be you, or it can be the next generation. I don't know. It just depends on the context. But a lot of times it's, the environment is not fostered for kids often to be able to make their own decisions. And I can look at, even in my own family, I can look at certain people in my family and be like, I can see why some of my cousins or some of our family members, I find them to be emotionally tough, but their parents have helicopter parented them. And they don't see it, but nothing in life yet has smacked them in the face. Mm-hmm. So they're soft. And they're protected from it. God forbid they get hit. They may not see it. And same thing on the other end is some people have just had a treacherous childhood. Okay. At what point do you realize it doesn't have to be either inherently? It's going to come with challenges. It's also going to come with ease. Yet it's learning how to see life. That's going to help you. So I don't even know if that fully answers your question, but I think there's a lot of context and nuance that goes into that conversation.
Yeah. I'm more so like, yes, kind of thinking about the person who, I think when you start peeling back all the layers of the onion, okay, what got you here? Mm-hmm. What did you believe? People start realizing that the life they created isn't the life that they want, mm-hmm. or doesn't feed their soul.
Yeah.
And it very much, like, it goes against your nature. Like, you don't want to do this. Mm-hmm. And you don't want to do it in the way that you've been doing this, mm-hmm. up until this point. I think of, like, women in business sometimes. Like, women who are maybe, like, the business owner or the entrepreneur. And you go business to business, building it like you have a penis and acting like a man.
That is, in many cases, the reality. Yeah.
So you're very masculine, but that's not actually your nature.
No.
And if you strip away all of the fear and scarcity and, like, feeling like you have to be the provider in your life, and you, like, really start to work through that, you show up very differently. And that doesn't mean that necessarily you don't have that, like, powerful energy about you, but it shows up in a different way.
100%.
Like, I look at probably the way I lead now and show up
versus
in
2.5 years
ago.
ago.
Totally different.
Two very different people. Oh, that's an episode. I can just sit here and just start rattling it. That is fundamentally two different people. It's, oh my God.
Wow. Wow. This is really the first time
if you're listening,
that out.
If you're listening, oh boy, we've been on a journey. It's not even close. It doesn't mean that you've become less passionate or any of that. It's just two totally different people. Mm-hmm. Totally different people.
But that's what I mean, like, for people listening, and I'm using, like, women in business as an example. You have all these beliefs, you're running all of these patterns, and then you end up in a life that's, like, not even really your nature of how 100%. You approach it. Mm-hmm. And that's scary and terrifying for somebody to, like, go through that change. Because also, oftentimes when we go through that, like, event that wakes us up, very rarely do we have a circle of people that we can connect with in that, mm-hmm. way. So you do feel alone, and it feels isolating, and, like, I don't want to live like this anymore, but I also do not have a community that supports this and, like, values that evolution either. And I think that can be extremely lonely and, like, terrifying.
That also tells you, though, where this all starts. It starts with you. When you get to the understanding, it doesn't matter who you are, high performer, low performer, whatever you want to look at this. At the end of the day, it starts with you. When you make the decision that I need to figure out who I want to be, I need to figure out what relationship looks like, connection looks like, money, whatever it is. When you do that, you then become very clear on, okay, this is what I'm looking for. And then the next step is, do you have the fortitude, the intestinal fortitude to courageously approach being exactly who you want to be and what you want? I think that's the biggest thing people struggle with, is like there are many people that I can sit down with and be like, okay, I think you actually have a decent grasp on what you want. You are afraid of being you. You're afraid of being rejected. You're afraid of dying alone, etc. And until you let go of that, yeah, you're going to continue to repeat your patterns and end up lonely and disconnected and all that. And the real question is like, is that what you want? And if I look at it through the lens of like, who are you at 50? Who are you at 60? If you're going to tell me, like, and we've talked about this before, if you're going to tell me the person you want to be at 50 or 60 is X, Y, and Z, and I ask you, would that person act like this? And you say, no. Why are you acting like that now? Why is that the way you carry yourself?
Yeah, I agree. Part of, I don't know how to describe it. That is the path, and you have to do this for you. And I think that it can be incredibly useful to have conversations or hear information that helps create that reassurance and belief when you first start that you are like on the right path. Many people don't have that.
Yeah.
What I would like is for people to be able to listen to this episode or like to this show and find that, where it's like, you're probably going to go through change and you're going to go through an evolution and you're going to ask yourself these questions and get clear on a lot of these things. And like, the reality is that you probably won't have very many people in person in your life that you're going to go for coffee with that are going to like encourage this evolution for you, because many of us don't have access to that.
I'll give you the one that's the hardest in all of this. So I can give you the frameworks on like the path, right? Like I think you and I have talked about this. Here's the part that most people don't even realize. How old were you when we started doing the one-on-one work?
Oh, 27.
Okay, you're how old now?
30.
Cool. So the amount of time you've been program immersed into one version of you versus the new path that you're going, the ratio is 1 to 9. So every 1 year that you've treaded into a new direction, there's 9 years of the opposite direction programming. I think the other problem for most people is they expect this to change overnight. All of their beliefs, all of their patterns, it's just like a muscle. It requires quite a bit of practice. So the other thing to remember is here that we can give you the questions to ask, what to do. It requires practice. The change, the shift that you want, high performer, lack of connection, whatever, it all requires practice of the new. And the immediate response doesn't always feel good. It's like lifting weights. You're going to be sore the next day, the first time you do it. It might hurt for a little while. Same thing with the emotional work. Same thing with changing the way you operate. Like it comes with discomfort, and I think the thing people are challenged with most is, can you work through and feel through the discomfort and be able to also accept that that's part of the learning process? That's probably the part that trips people up. I think there's a lot of information out there on how to become a better person, how to map towards life you want. There's plenty of them. There's the Tony Robbins of the world. There's all sorts of people out there. You can go on YouTube and find all this shit. Most people will not willingly put the practice into the simple things for a long enough time horizon to truly feel and experience the change. They want to immerse themselves. I bet you if you immerse yourself, it would take less time too. That's, I think, the biggest challenge for people. I don't think it's that the utility isn't out there. I think it's that being able to lean in and practice the things that you are working towards, that is the thing that most people get off the road for. It's just uncomfortable. It's not what you know. It's not what's certain to you. And so if I give you I've talked to you about this, about different aspects of your life. I've said the same thing about certain situations for 2+ years. Eventually you got to it, but my messaging didn't change. But I also understood as part of your growing experience, you had to experience the practice of doing certain things before it clicked.
Yeah.
And I think if you're listening, you also have to remember some of these things take practice before they fully click.
I think also when people are going through change, they have to like bring awareness to the fact that you are like more than capable of doing
100%.
this. I had somebody ask me probably within the last month or two, why did you keep going in business?
Mm-hmm.
Like there has been so many challenges. Like why didn't you quit and shut it down? And at the root of it is like, I believed in myself.
Mm-hmm.
I believed that, cool, this is a season and I'm a bit tired right now. Or just like anything that I've ever been through in life. At the core of it, it's like, I believe in myself and I'm willing to bet on myself.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if somebody doesn't believe in themselves, then like none of this matters anyways, because you won't apply it because you
100%.
don't see the value in yourself. And like there's probably degrees of how you value yourself and show up in the world. But if you don't even have the core belief in yourself and that betting on yourself and investing in yourself is worth it. And I don't mean invest through the sense of like go fucking hire a life coach for $30,000, but like going through your beliefs and challenging your way of thinking and being consistent with the small things like is an investment in yourself. No different than going to the gym 4 or 5 times a week, getting 10,000 steps. Like all of those things are little investments.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of people struggle with belief in themselves. I also think a lot of people do not take any time to back up why they should have belief in themselves. It's like, oh, fuck, I can't change. So, well, that's not necessarily true. There's probably been quite a few things in your life that you actually learned or accomplished that you didn't think you were capable of. And I think in the process of that, if you do not have somebody who is going to remind you, nor should it be anyone's job or responsibility to do so, like you have to develop that for yourself or else like you stay consistent with nothing.
What's your experience in that? So how do you, with your own internal shift as you've gone through the high performance roller coaster to some degree, what was your shift to realize I can change the way I am?
There's never been a goal I've set that I haven't accomplished.
Okay.
And when I apply myself in life, I like truly get whatever the fuck I want.
Mm-hmm.
So I have like almost 2 decades to back up that like if I want this and I show up and I'm consistent with it, like I will get the thing that I am looking for.
What gives you evidence of it?
My behavior and events in life that prove that like with consistency and like application of doing something,
Mm-hmm.
that I've been able to like accomplish this thing that I'm looking for.
Mm-hmm.
I was super angry growing up and volatile and used to like put holes in the wall and like had no emotional regulation.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody sent me to therapy. Nobody was like, oh, maybe she should get counseling and we should work through this. I had to learn those skills by myself. And a lot of them I found from YouTube videos when I was like a teenager trying to learn to like self-regulate. I quit drugs without rehab and therapy, got clean, never touched drugs again. Did all my high schooling, got my diploma, was valedictorian, saved up money to go traveling, did that, left relationships when I wasn't financially stable and just like got another job and figured it out. I have so many reference points throughout my life, even with little things that back up like that belief in myself.
What you said is the bigger thing, is like if someone doesn't have what you have, it's little pieces of evidence you need. It's not always the big things. I think sometimes people struggle with the change because they don't even look for the littlest thing. This sounds awfully simple to people, but if the simple practice of I commit to drinking 1 glass of water every day right when I wake up, doing that every day, that's a 30-second task. That in itself can create trust and belief that you can do the things you commit to.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the bigger thing, is like, can you find pieces of evidence? Doesn't matter how big or small, because change starts with small behaviors. It doesn't start with big. Right?
All of those small behaviors map to
Something bigger.
the big outcome.
Yeah.
Like grade 12 doesn't happen without showing up every single day, going to bed on time, being ass in seat at 8 o'clock in the morning. Like, not, this is what you're going to do, and then committing
100%.
to getting it done.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, I think that a lot of people lack belief in themselves. And they just don't spend any time developing consistency where, like, you do the little things over and over again. I think the first step to that is just, like, say no to more stuff. I think we say yes to way too much. And I think a lot of people listening to this blindly say yes and maybe to shit they should say no to in life. Can you help me move? Oh, yeah, for sure. Can we go out and do this tonight? Absolutely. Like, it's just like, yes. And you just overload yourself in everything you do. And then the things that you need to do for yourself to develop yourself don't end up happening because you're just like expelling this energy all over the place, which is uncomfortable
100%.
until it's not. And then, like, you are very cautious of what you say yes to and you are willing to commit to, because you realize when you pull all of that back and you stop just like recklessly spending your energy everywhere, you're like, oh, there is a cost to saying yes. And are you willing to pay the price of saying yes? And for some things you are, and for some things it's why.
100%.
So, key takeaway from this. What led you?
What got you to where you are? When you burn out at the end of this high performance train that you've been on, how'd you get there? Why did you do the things that got you there? All those things. And then look at it. Why you did those things for a reason. What beliefs did you have about those things that led you there? And what was the cost of those behaviors? I think once you start realizing the cost of those behaviors, that's when you start to recalibrate.
That's where the money is. You do the first things first, and then you put a little tally on the sheet.
Yeah.
What did it cost you? Everything.
Yeah. You often find that you're not okay with a lot of it. And don't get me wrong, there are commitments you make, right? There are bigger purpose things that you do, but at the same time, I don't think most people are clear on what they value. And so if you tell me what you value and the behaviors you exhibited don't actually line up when we start questioning it, that's when you realize it's time to change. So, how'd you get here? What were the behaviors that led you there? And what was the cost associated with those behaviors? Think of it. If you're fat, you ate like a fat ass. Why'd you do that? Because you were stress eating because you didn't like your job. Don't you want to be healthy? Cool. So you told me you want to be healthy, but you exude unhealthy behaviors that led you to be a fat ass. We just made it so simple to solve your problem. Don't be a fat ass. It's way simpler than I think people like sitting there might get paralyzed, but it's like it is so simple, it's uncomfortable. The answers in all of this become so simple that it's uncomfortable that you don't like you not changing is you just deciding I don't actually want to change. And then you have to live with that. If that's the path you choose. Let us know if that's the path you're choosing. We'd love to know what it's like to... You know, it's like you have your Recovering Asshole series. I think if you choose that path, you're just on the asshole path.
Yeah, you got to recover.
Yeah, so if you don't want to follow the path of the recovering asshole, just keep going.
We'll just see a steep drop off on the unsubscribe right on this episode. It's just too simple.
It is.
It's too simple and I don't like it. I'm going to leave.
It's so much of this is far more simple than people realize.
Mm-hmm. Simplicity is uncomfortable until it's not.
And then that's like the biggest thing you pursue.
Yes.
Hard to believe, I'm aware.
That's where we're going to end this.
Like, subscribe, leave a comment, leave a review. Tell us if this was too simple. We'll make it even simpler. Second grade reading level. And we'll see you on the next episode.
Beautiful.